The date was July 7th, 2007, 7707. And I spent the night at his house so we can make the commute easier. That evening and that morning, I recall looking at his baby boy who was also there with us and thinking, wow, he looks just like his dad. Even though he was questioning it, to me it was pretty obvious that that child was his. They were waiting on a DNA test. I couldn't understand why the question. The little boy looked exactly like his father. That night, I stayed the night at his house, and that morning, he'd taken me to the clinic. On the way there, driving up the road, there were people who lined the sides of the road with posters and images pleading with us not to abort our baby. But we were at a crossroads. I was at a crossroads. I was already the mother to 3 little boys, a single mom at that, and I was in my early 20s. And neither he nor I expected us to have this lifelong commitment. Yes, we had sex, but we thought we were being safe. It was with a condom after all. But lo and behold, the condom broke. And a short while later, I found out I was pregnant. So I remember going into the abortion clinic. He gave me his part of the money and I had mine. And I went to the window and I let them know what was going on. They ushered me to the back after doing a pee test and an ultrasound and a few other things. And then they gave me this pill to take. It was the abortion pill. You see, because the abortion isn't actually when they go in and suck the fetus out with the tool. The abortion happens with the pill. I guess it's something like the day after pill, I guess you call it. So I taken the pill. And right as I was taking the pill, I couldn't get over the emotional grief and trauma that I was experiencing. And I remember asking and saying to myself, God, how will you ever be able to forgive me for this? And yet I felt as though I had no choice. Again, he had made it painfully clear that he didn't want any more children. He was already questioning one, and he was not ready for another. Not with the girl who it was just a one-night stand or maybe a two-night stand. The broken girl, the girl who had no self-esteem. Yeah, I put it on cute. I showed up to his house with some nice shorts on and some wedges and a cute little shirt. But inside, I felt like trash. I felt no good at all. Life, up until that point, and quite some time after, had beaten me so bad. After enduring molestation and all of these other things, I thought sex was the answer. That was the solution for me. I never have had this addiction with drugs or alcohol, but food and sex were my drugs of choice. Often I'd give myself away, thinking maybe, just maybe, he'll be able to love me. And like I said, he and I agreed that we didn't know that this was going to continue, that we would be stuck together. Even now, some 16 years later, forever he'll be written on my history that the one time I had an abortion, I did it with him. I know his name, Stephen. But that's all I know. Sometime later, I saw him at a Walmart in the city where I lived, and he knew my face, but he didn't even recall my name. Like I said, I went in and I took the pill, and I felt devastated. I was broken. I had my first son. By 17, I'd had my second. And by 20, I was a single mom of 3. So again, when I met him, I did not want any more children. but there was a part of me that did not want to abort my baby. However, realizing and recognizing that he absolutely did not want anything to do with another child, I agreed. It wasn't an easy decision, but I agreed. I was already living in government housing, taking care of these little boys by myself, struggling my way through in every sense of the word, depressed, broken. And the thing about depression, yes, sometimes you can mask it, but for me, my outer environment, it showed what was going on internally. My house was often filthy, and yet I would be ashamed and embarrassed if someone showed up unannounced. But there was so much garbage on the inside that it manifested on the outside. I've witnessed this in other scenarios, not just my own story, but in other stories. And so when I see this condition, I know that it's a sign of some garbage that's internal. Maybe they recognize it and maybe they don't, but I did. So again, he and I agreed that I would have the abortion. And then I recall going and sitting in this room where other girls were sitting. I think it was a waiting room in a sense. I remember hearing some chat between a few women how they'd been there 6 or 7 or 8 times, literally using the abortion clinic as birth control. Yes, they were controlling their birth rate, but they were not controlling their sexual activity. Or were they? Were they merely those who were trying to be careful and by accident or by consequence ended up pregnant? He and I thought we were being safe by using protection, but we weren't. That condom, it gave in, it gave up, and almost immediately he and I knew what was going on. I aborted my baby July 7th, 2007. Shortly after sitting in that room for some time, they give the pill some time to work. Normally you start to cramp, maybe start to spot. That's the sign of the abortion taking place. And then they take you into this room. You lie on a bed, put your legs up. They use the tool and they suck the fetus out. On that day, that's what happened to me. On that day, that's what happened to my baby. Then shortly after leaving that room, they put you in another area where you are to rest for, I think, approximately 45 minutes, maybe an hour and a half. I'm not exactly sure. I remember my phone going off earlier, and I didn't take the call. So while laying in that bed, I dared to listen to the voicemail. It was my cousin. She was in the hospital. She was giving birth to her first child. I remember thinking to myself, maybe she was calling because I wasn't supposed to go through with the abortion. But it was too late. I had already killed my baby. I left there. My boys spent the night with someone else, maybe another relative or something. I can't exactly remember those details. However, I remember calling another one of my cousins, and she put me in touch with a lady, an evangelist or something. And we went to her house that evening, and I shared with her what was going on. Because at that moment, I felt devastated. At that moment, I felt shattered. I believe this was either a Friday or a Saturday, because I do recall going to church maybe a day or so later and laying on the altar, completely devastated, completely broken, thinking again, I've added another thing for God not to love me, another reason for God to have justification for him not to love me. I laid there, and I know from conversations that happened shortly thereafter that it was assumed that I was on the altar due to a toxic on again and off again relationship I've been in. This person also attended the church that I attended. Actually, he's why I met my ministers. He's how I met my ministers. But in truth, that wasn't it. I prayed about that situation many, many, many times. And though the ending of that relationship hurt me, it was over. And I knew that. And in that moment, my grief had nothing to do with him. Yet, my tears, my pain was also all too familiar. And without inquiring what was really going on, it was assumed that I was upset because of him. He wasn't the reason. I just killed my baby. And I felt like God would never forgive me. Some years later, I sit here in my closet. So if you see the shoe rack behind me, I'm sitting on the floor in my closet because I kept telling myself another day, another time, maybe tomorrow, maybe next month, maybe when I get some things together, better mics, some video quality, lights, whatever the case may be. Maybe when I learn how to edit a little better, because I have no plans on editing this video. This is my story. And I know it's not just my story, but I was wanting to wait. I kept finding reasons why I shouldn't go ahead and start a YouTube channel, why I shouldn't go ahead and share my truth. I'm super transparent when it comes to my story. Truth is, sharing my truth has been the balm of my healing, the agent of my healing, the catalyst for my healing. No one can tell my story like I can. No one felt or feels the pain attached to that story like me. So in this moment, I felt like I didn't want to wait another minute. I felt like deep was calling me to share this story. The Holy Spirit was calling me to share this story. Because just like me, there are a lot of women, there are a lot of men who feel like, surely this time, God, you won't be able to forgive me. How will you ever be able to love me? I get it. I was once a promiscuous girl, giving my body away. And no one dared to ask me why. I got a lot of judgment, a lot of ridicule. I heard it time and time again, you pregnant again? Even when I got pregnant with, my husband and I got pregnant with our last kid, I remember still feeling very much ashamed. You heard me clearly. I am a married woman, 13 years in. At that time, it was 4.5, 5. And yet, shame gripped me. I did not enjoy that pregnancy because I couldn't get over what people would think of me. I knew that it wasn't about God at that moment because I was married. My husband and I were doing what married people do. And through that, we conceived a child. But I couldn't shake the trauma and the pain and the judgment and that girl stain that had drug me up and down the streets, all around the neighborhood for so many years. I couldn't shake that. I felt unlovable. I felt broken, hurt. My self-esteem was bad. And I'm a girl who has endured molestation. Several of my cousins tried to have sex with me. And the half has not been told. So when people would see this promiscuous girl, they saw this young girl who had all these babies. It was assumed that I was uneducated. True enough, I was a high school dropout. I have since went back to get my GED. I got my college cosmetology license. I'm an author. I started a nonprofit. I founded a nonprofit from the ground up. Recently, I became a certified life coach, amongst a number of other things. And truth is, my trauma pointed me in the direction of my purpose. That abortion story, that abortion pointed me in the direction of my purpose. I wasn't sexually active because I just love sex so much. I was desperate to be loved, and I thought giving my body away was the way to be loved. I thought maybe this one. I recall the times where I would be intimate with a guy and I would want to cuddle afterwards. But he wouldn't. Or he would, and then I never hear from him again. I was looking for something different. It was never about the sex, or very few times it was about the sex. Life taught me up until that moment that the way to love is through giving my body away. When the molestation happened, I didn't give my body away. My innocence was stolen from me by a person who claimed to love me. And that's what I carried the rest of my days for a very long time, until I started my healing journey that still continues. A journey of self-forgiveness, because truth is, there were a lot of things that happened to me, but there were also a lot of things that I did to myself. And I have to take responsibility and hold myself accountable for that. That's the only way true healing has been able to take place. Because it would not have been enough for me to heal everyone else or forgive everyone else and not forgive myself. I had to forgive me. I had to forgive myself for the promiscuity. I had to forgive myself for the abortion. I've had to forgive myself for the way I've spoken to myself. I've had to forgive myself for the self-hate. And more than anything, I've had to forgive myself for the power I gave people over my life. I cared so much about what people would think about me. I acted out of that. Truth is, part of the reason I got the abortion in the first place is because I was ashamed. I was ashamed of what everyone would think of me and what they would say about me if they knew I was pregnant again. I was pregnant again, having another baby that would make 4 times a single mom. But I wasn't asking them for nothing. Yes, I lived in my government housing, so it wasn't that I was doing it completely alone. I was receiving food stamps at the time. We were all on Medicaid, but I also hustled. I did hair on the side. I've been doing hair for more than 25 years. Some 12 and a half, I became a licensed cosmetologist. So, but in that time, I just cared so much about what they would think that I acted out. And then I stuffed it inside. And in stuffing it inside, I carried the weight of all of that baggage, that trauma, in addition to all of the baggage and trauma that I was already carrying. And my body ballooned. I'm only 5'2". And before I'd known it, I'd gotten up to 263 pounds. I was eating all of my emotions, all of my pain. Thanks be unto God, I didn't start smoking crack or doing pills. I've never been that kind of girl, or drinking. And for those who have, I get it. I understand. My addiction is no better than your addiction. Just like you, I've snuck away to the parking lot of some place to consume things that were not healthy for me. I've been the girl who would take my last bit of money and go to the restaurant, get me a burger, sit in the parking lot, eat it real fast, discard the evidence just for a quick fix. Food and sex, my drugs of choice. I'm not so high and mighty that I could not have given into those things. Honestly, there have been moments within the last few years that I wanted to drink, but I just couldn't. I've seen what drug addiction has done to so many people. I grew up in a house with a parent who was an addict. I have an aunt who overdosed on drugs. I grew up in a neighborhood where when I look back and I revisit those places, I don't even recognize the guys who I grew up with. I'm 38, I'll be 39 next month. Many of them may be in their very early 40s, and drugs have destroyed their lives. But like I said, even before then, I've seen what addiction could do to people. And so, drug addiction, I should say. And so, I just couldn't allow myself. I will say I tried weed one time 23 years ago. It did nothing for me. God was covering me. Not because I'm so strong that weed not do anything, but because that was not a part of my purpose. That was not a part of my test. That was not going to lead me into destiny. But that abortion did. Some years ago, I started my nonprofit organization, Awaken Her Wellness. My approach is the whole woman, mind, body, and soul. The whole woman. I very much believe in standing in who you are unapologetically. There are so many transitions in my life. The transition from teenage mom to being a married mother. The whore who became the housewife. The high school dropout who is an entrepreneur. And on the high school dropout part, I'll say this. I dropped out second semester of 9th grade when I found out I was pregnant with my first child. I dropped out of high school because the choice was receive AFDC, a once a month check, and I believe it was $263 to care for my child in a trailer with a mom who was also on a fixed income, or get a job. I chose to get a job. But I don't know if anyone ever asked me, Janet, why did you drop out of high school? That's my story. To take care of my son. He was my son. He is my son. He was my responsibility. And I knew $263 wasn't going to do it. Not only that, he didn't have the most present father. So I had to do what I had to do. But this day, I have 3 sons who have graduated from high school. Not only that, they have gone on to do much better than me. Much better than me. They are much more sound at their ages than I was at this very point of my life. My sons are 23, 20, and 18. That's my story. And if I would have had that baby, he or she, and I believe it was a she, would be about 16 years old at this moment. 16. There's a great part of me that believes it was my daughter, because some years later I had a dream about visiting a graveyard and seeing a little girl. I believe that was my little girl. I believe God was giving me closure in that moment. And I have closure. I don't carry the weight or the shame or any of that. I forgive me. And more importantly, I have learned through relationship that God never stopped loving me. In my deep running, very much self-sabotaging history, God never stopped loving me. When I was giving my body away, God never stopped loving me. I'm not a proponent of just going out and sinning and just taking for granted God's grace. That's not what I'm saying. But I need everyone to know and to recognize that we can't earn the love of God. That abortion didn't make him love me less, and nothing would have made him love me more. Nothing. I've never known a love like this. In every sense of the word, I've had to prove myself in order to feel significant. I've had to prove myself in order to feel loved. I feel like I've had to jump through hoops and bend over backwards, maybe walk on eggshells from time to time. And if my humanness showed up, I feared the love being taken away. But in the case of grace, in the case of my relationship with God, He has proven to me there is absolutely nothing that I could have, would have done that would make Him love me any more or less. So people hear me refer to this often, that I'm a daddy's girl. And I have to be honest. When I say that, I'm not talking about my biological father. He's alive. Our relationship, it is what it is. Some moments I end phone calls with him and I feel less love than when I began the phone call. But the word of God reminds us that when our mothers and our fathers forsake us, the Lord God will raise us up. The Lord God has raised me up. Again, I talked about Awaken Her Wellness. When God gave me the idea for Awaken Her Wellness, it was at the height and thick of my insecurity, when I felt the lowest. Yet He gave me the entire of the idea. It was a Wednesday night. I was in Bible study. My pastor at the time was talking about writing the vision and making it plain. That evening I went home and God gave me an acronym, AWAKEN. AWAKEN. Amazing women attaining knowledge, embracing newness. Today, I am an awakened woman. And this video was really just so I can get it off my chest and to share my abortion story. I had an abortion July 7th, 2007. And I can sit here at this moment, at the near end of 2023, and tell you I know for sure that God loved me still. And He always will. So let me encourage you in this. Yes, you may be just like me, giving your body away. Maybe you know why, and maybe you don't. Maybe you're one of those whose addiction is alcohol or drugs. You pop pills for enjoyment or whatever the case. Maybe you're a kleptomaniac or a gambler. Maybe your thing is shopping all the time. Or you just sit on the phone and gossip, gossip, gossip. Maybe you get a high out of belittling other people. You're judgmental. You're one of those ones who have a whole plank in your eye, but you recognize the speck in another. I don't know what the case may be. I don't know what it is. And truthfully, it's not mine to figure out. I tell people there are 2 prayers that have changed my life more than anything. 2. The first, I ask God, who do you say I am? The second, I ask him to allow me to see me the way he sees me. And it's been life-changing. I'm not the girl who had an abortion July 7th, 2007, who was promiscuous, who got pregnant due to a broken condom, who was about to be a 4-time single mom, living in government housing, surviving on government assistance, food stamps, and Medicaid, and using my utility check that the apartment complex provided to purchase tissue and things like that. I'm not her. I am not the high school dropout. I am not any of those things. I'm not even the positive things. I am who I am. I am the daughter of the King. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I am the apple of God's eye. And I sit here actually in my closet, not wondering, but being sure of that one thing. Being sure of the fact that I've done so many things. I've given God so many reasons not to love me. So many reasons to reject me. So many reasons to walk away. Because so many did. So many did. And it's been traumatic. It has hurt me. I've been left disappointed. People that I never thought would break me tried to break me. And yet I fought like hell, excuse my French, to remain, to continue to grow, and to intentionally be kind. I share this story, and there will be more to come, because I believe that one of the mandates God has for me is to speak up for those who feel like they have no voice, who feel like they can't share their stories. I believe there are a lot of people who dress it up really, really well, who don't look like what they've gone through. And they care so much about maintaining an image that they have not given themselves permission to speak their truth. I speak up for them. I share my story for the girls and the boys who have experienced molestation. I've heard it a lot of times. I've heard it many, many times about those cousins and those uncles and those friends of the family who have violated these little boys and little girls. I've heard it. I know of many scenarios where people, those who have been victimized, turn to alcoholism and they turn to drug addiction to numb out the pain. I believe that a lot of the addictive tendencies we have is because we don't deal with the trauma that's going on in our psyche, in our heart. I believe it's an extension of that. And if you really, really want to get some deliverance, some healing, to learn how to love yourself, you have to go to the root. And the root is there's a lot that has happened to us. Culturally, I don't think we've spoken up enough. I'm glad that there's a lot more attention on mental health, but there's still work to be done. Just last year, I was faced with a terrible bout of anxiety. As I talked about earlier in this video, I've experienced times of depression. However, anxiety was an entirely different monster. The accusations constantly, the constant being afraid. I had almost gotten to the place where I didn't even want to go outside, watching every door at every building I was in, always scanning the parking lot, waiting on some disaster, waiting on things to happen. I've been there. And like I said, I'll share this story very soon, because I'll be back. God has placed this on me, unscripted, unedited. What you see is what you get. I'm Janet, Jonte, whichever you prefer, coach. I've been through some things, but I am not those things. I'm sharing my truth, my stories, because I want you to be encouraged in this. You too can overcome. I don't care what it looks like. I don't care what it feels like, how hard, how heavy. You too can overcome. I'm proof